Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Communities Live here on Sheffield Live 93.2 FM. And we have directors John Mawson and Misha Crosby. Good afternoon.
Hi, Chris. Good to
Chris,
be
how are
here.
you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? How are you both?
Good, thank you very much.
It's quite early on the West Coast here, but I'm awake.
So, I'm going to ask you, tell us a bit, give us a bit of background. Tell us a bit about yourselves.
After you, Misha.
After me. So I was born in London. I've lived in Los Angeles maybe for the last 14 years or so. Worked mostly, in fact, entirely in entertainment that entire time, mostly in film and television. I've acted for a very long time, but in maybe more the last sort of 6, 7 years or so, I've been putting together various feature films, various projects. And this particular project came to me as a feature film through John. It was a project that John had written as a feature called The San Demetrio, which was a fantastic script, and it was something that we were looking to put into production until a little thing called COVID-19 came along. But I'll stop there and I'll let John introduce himself before we go further.
Right. So I was born in London, born and raised in London and Suffolk. I was originally a deck officer in the Merchant Navy. I was at sea for 13 years, qualified as a ship's captain, came ashore and spent many years in the marine insurance and claims industry. And then one day I'd had enough of all that and I hung up my suit and went to drama school and trained as an actor. A few years after that, about 2011, I moved out to LA primarily as an actor, but also writing and started to produce. And in fact, I met Misha when I cast him in a short film that I made, which did pretty well on the festival circuit and so forth. And then we've collaborated on some stuff together, some movies and some projects. And then we started to talk about this. Originally, as he said, I wrote it as a feature film. I then expanded it up into a TV series. But we then met with a friend of mine, Jack Bowman, from also a Brit, lives in Ealing, who runs Audio Marbles, and it was he who suggested we think about doing this as an audio movie. And both Misha and I said, "What on earth is an audio movie?"
And he proceeded to tell us. He said, "Well, listen, imagine a high-end feature film with full sound design, orchestral score, maybe putting it in Dolby Atmos, but just without the pictures." And we're like, "Okay, that might be something that we could approach, especially." Now with these restrictions that had come in, we had to work in a lot of isolation, right? So we sort of started to explore how we could maybe pull something like this off. The script was entirely rewritten for the year. John went away and did some great work with notes from myself. We had a team in London called B7 Media who had a lot of experience in the audio space, led by Andrew Sewell and Helen Quigley. And once we had the scripts in a decent place, we started going out and trying to cast it like we would any other project. The tricky thing was when we came to actually do the sessions for the recording, we knew we weren't going to be able to have any actors in the same room. So every single performance out of these 100 different roles had to be recorded individually, much the same way animation is done, right? And then afterwards, it was about putting that entire jigsaw puzzle back together. You know, you're talking sometimes episode 1, scene 4, take 5 of one character's performance with then, maybe take 6 of another, take 6.5 of something else. And the whole jigsaw puzzle emerged into hopefully something that was going to sound coherent and entertaining.
And I mean, I've got to ask as well, who influenced you to become actors and a director? I mean, who are your main influences?
I come from a long line of actors, funnily enough. My father was not, he was a surgeon, but my grandmother was an actress. Ina Grossmith, her father was an actor, George Grossmith Jr. His father was an actor, George Grossmith Sr., who was the lead in many of the original operettas done by Gilbert Sullivan. So it's in my blood, if you like. And I just always enjoyed the process. And I kind of got derailed early and, ran away to sea and followed a career there. But after a while, it just sort of tugged at me until I couldn't say no anymore.
And I guess for me, Chris, it was quite young the influence came in. My dad is a musician. He used to be the oboist for the BBC Concert Orchestra, but he would also play in West End shows. And so I remember being taken at a very young age to go and see these musicals. And I would be down there in the orchestra pit listening, and sometimes I'd say, "Hey, could you go get me a seat in the audience?" And sure enough, I would watch. And at a young age, seeing these actors on stage making me feel these different things about what was going on seemed like magic. And it very quickly became something that I really wanted to learn how to do. I started acting relatively young. I did everything I could do. I auditioned for the National Youth Music Theatre in London, probably when I was about 12, 13. Got in, started doing some plays. I remember there was an Edinburgh Festival I did, and then every year after that. Um, Again, the circumstances of being born in London were very lucky. You know, then I found myself going to a drama school in London, and the proximity of that made that a lot easier than for some. And got a very decent agent after that. Did quite a lot of British television. I did a merry-go-round of, Hobby City, The Bill, Hollyoaks. Gosh, probably a good few others in there as well before Los Angeles became an opportunity. And then it was kind of it was a bit of a different ball game when I got to move here.
I mean, I've got to say, I mean, one of my favorite TV series is American Horror Story,
Mhm.
and I mean, it's so different. I mean, it's not. It's like it's one series always focuses on that. The say on it's like if it was always focused on a murder house, and then like circus, and then it's like witches, and it's it's so it was so different to what other TV series were really.
Yeah, yeah, it's really got just such a huge following of its own. I think it carved out its own space in a world that can be quite crowded, and getting to be a part of that for a little bit. I remember, getting onto that set, and my season, as you may know, was the 1984 season,
Yeah,
and no, it was an impressive juggernaut to be a part of. Really, I mean, some of these TV shows are far bigger than most movies, and it was no, it was something I was really proud to tread the boards on for sure.
and I mean you met some worldwide actors. I mean, impressive actors. And I would like to ask, I mean, if there's anybody that you could work with in the near future, who would it be and why?
Gosh. Well, we were lucky enough to work with some of the really great actors on this project. Getting Brian Cox and Natalie Emmanuel and of course John Malkovich was great, and to have landed Thomas Brodie Sangster, who so encapsulated the lead role of Arthur Hawkins, was fantastic. And we were so nervous when Brian Cox, who was the first of the lead actors to be we recorded, that when we found him a studio near where he lived in Massachusetts, and we put on the limo and we got in there, and suddenly he just walks in and he's the most charming man and unbelievably good at what he does.
Oh, professional. Oh my gosh. It was quite a joy to direct. It's more guidance than directing with Brian. He really was so on it. But yeah, I think, listen, that we could list you probably a whole bunch of names of the greats, past and present. But specifically with this, I think when we were sort of going through our list, the absolute right people ended up being the people we were able to cast. Like alluding to what John said about Thomas, not only does he encapsulate it, it felt like he was born to play somebody of that era, right? Of
Yeah,
somebody in the 1940s, and everybody may say this, right? It's like once you've had somebody in the role, you're like, you can't imagine anybody else doing it. And at this point,
sure.
Thomas is our Arthur Hawkins, and I don't think I can think of somebody who would have done this job better than him.
And we had 37 actors, including ourselves, in this project, recording over 100 different roles, and we were lucky enough to work with some really fantastic actors from the UK. And Juliet Aubrey
Yeah.
and Rupert Vansittart, who play husband and wife in the show,
Mhm.
were absolutely stunningly good. And actually, I think we talking about it afterwards, during the process. I think it was Rupert Vansittart who stood out to us as just the most stunningly good actor. And I think he's often written off a little as this, bluff, pompous English guy, but my God, is he good. And
Oh
he
my gosh.
delivered a performance of a lifetime for us.
Yeah.
And we were so impressed by his work.
Absolutely.
I mean, I want to talk about Unsinkable now. I mean, I watched the first episode and it's so gripping. I mean, it's really a great first episode, and I can't wait to get through to the rest of the series. But I've got to say, it's not like your typical film or your typical TV series. What's so different is that you've got no imagery, but you feel like you're actually there, and you feel like you're actually there. And I want to talk a bit about what made you decide to make it an audio instead of an actual TV series.
Sure.
Well, it was because really it was originally triggered by Jack Bowman, who's worked a huge amount, with the BBC doing audio pieces for them, including some really high quality work, and the fact that we were inspired that my God, we could make this as good as a movie with no narration, with fantastic quality sound brought to us by the best in the business. Jimmy Boyle, we found him because of his work on Band of Brothers, but he's done James Bond movies. He did Wonder Woman 84. I mean, this is a team at the top of their game. Stephen Endelman, our composer, was one of the great composers, and I was so keen to get him because I wanted a really epic soundscape, musicscape. And so we just found, and also it was COVID. We couldn't do anything else. Our original plans to make it in a visual sphere, got sidetracked or got, shunted to one side for a while. So this was an opportunity to explore this medium and, realize maybe we could make something that people will listen to and really respond to in the way that, it's so great to hear you have.
And I mean, so I want to talk a bit about the plot. I mean, we don't want to spoil too much about it, but tell us, for our listeners, tell us a bit about the plot.
Well, I knew about this plot, but this story was, I knew about this because perhaps of my time in the Merchant Navy. It's kind of one of those things that's a bit baked into the DNA, this story. It's a true story. The San Demetrio was a British tanker that loaded aviation fuel for the Royal Air Force in the United States and set off across the Atlantic to the UK in a convoy of 38 other cargo ships, guarded by one Royal Navy ship, which was a very elderly converted merchant ship. It was a converted passenger ship called the Jervis Bay. And they got halfway across the Atlantic, and then they got jumped by a brand new German battleship, a pocket battleship called the Admiral Scheer. And as you can imagine, it was carnage. And the Jervis Bay charged that battleship to give the convoy time to escape. And by their sacrifice, most of the ships did get away.
Yeah.
But several ships were sunk, and the San Demetrio was hit and set on fire badly, and the crew had to abandon ship. And I will leave it there in terms of the story, but what I can tell you is that the story that then develops, that we then hear about, is an extraordinary one, and it's a true story. And because of this, what happened, it turned into a really interesting and important case in court in England after a couple of months afterwards. So we go into the courtroom, a lot, and gradually the audience finds out, what is this court case about, and what's going on, and what is the importance of it. So we have these strands of what's going on the ship, or the crew that have left the ship, the families back home, particularly Thomas Brace's wife, played by Natalie Emmanuel, and then the court case, which does a lot of the work of the heavy lifting, if you like, of what might otherwise have been narration.
And I mean, you've worked with some worldwide actors on this project as well. I mean, John Malkovich, Thomas Brodie Sangston, Natalie Emmanuel, and Brian Cox. I mean, how did you convince them to work with it? I mean, what was their reaction when you announced it was going to be an audio movie and not an actual movie or TV series, should I say?
I think they were very positive when we approached it the same way we would have approached a movie, right? We went out, we made our lists, we were then like, who could be great for each role, and made offers, right? And then there's a negotiation process with the agents. There's some Hollywood in there to hopefully get who you want. Brian was the first big one. I remember calling John, whose voice went up several octaves and went onto a table as he cheered with glee. And the great thing about getting somebody like Brian is Hollywood can be a town where everyone loves being first to be second. So it starts momentum. And it wasn't soon after where we had Malkovich and Thomas. Natalie, actually, I knew a little bit before. We did a show called Hollyoaks quite some time ago together, but it really started forming, just this wonderful cast that had depth, even outside of those headliners. John had mentioned Rupert and Juliet and a whole bunch of others. Even John Altman from EastEnders famously plays Nasty Nick in the UK, who does a wonderful job in this as Bosun Fletcher. But it was more of a case of, like with anything, you've got to make sure the material that you're asking people to come on board with is as good as it can be. And we've done a lot of work on those scripts to make sure that it was something that could be attractive. Obviously, the other elements have to be there too with those negotiations, but and timing is another thing. Is like, are people available? And the one good thing about that is not only did COVID throw spanners in the works for a lot of people's schedules, it also meant that we didn't have to do things on the same days. We were recording some people's performances on a certain day. Other people, we could work around other people's schedules on another day. So it was this whole big jigsaw puzzle of making all of that work. And yeah.
We recorded, I think, over about 5 months all over the world remotely. I mean, we directed principally by Zoom so that we could talk to the actors. We were able to listen to what was coming out of them in studio quality sound so that we were hearing exactly what was going on. We asked Brian, as our first big name to come on board, what attracted him to it. And he was kind enough to say he really, really responded to the script. He thought it was a really strong script. He responded to the story because it is an extraordinary one. And he revealed that he loved the medium of sound because his first 9 years as a professional actor, he was in a radio play. And it showed. I mean, he's so good at it. So that, and a lot of the actors said exactly the same thing. They responded to the writing, they responded to the story, they responded to the roles they were being asked to play. They could see how it was working, and they felt fully immersed very quickly. As you say, you don't have the picture painted for you. You paint it in your mind the way you respond to it, and as a result, it's very vivid in your mind as an actor when you're portraying the role that you've been asked to do.
And I mean, for our listeners at home who want to break into this kind of industry, the movie and acting or directing, should I say, what advice would you give to our listeners?
Gosh, that's a difficult one, I suppose. I guess from my side, you have to have a passion for it, and a vision for yourself in this world. It's not easy. It's a tough world. You'll need a second job for sure, but you have to have a passion for it and for it as a career.
And in addition to that, I would just say, being able to present anything or get behind your passion with something of value, right? And if your thing of value is a story that you've created with fantastic IP, intellectual property around it, that then you can gain some fans for, right? Because, it's all very well saying, hey, I want to direct or I want to do this, but, waiting for somebody else to give you an opportunity to do something, it's going to be very few and far between. So if you can create your own opportunity, that would be, I think, one of the most important things you could do. And even if that's not, it might be unlikely that the first thing you do in that industry is going to be to direct something. If you can get on board with somebody else's project to begin with, to, see how some of those pieces work, and then, look at that. It's like, okay, how did they do this? Maybe we put together these pieces here and learn how to do that for your own. But certainly, attaching yourself in an indisposable way to some really, really strong, a strong story, strong script, strong IP, and building, the train from there. It's amazing. I found that, before the train is built, it's a little hard to get the momentum going. But once the train is built and it starts leaving the station, you'd be amazed at how many people want to jump on the train.
Yeah,
and I mean, sorry.
If I can just add to that, I retrained as an actor. My intention was to be an actor, but I realized I could write. I realized I had stories I wanted to tell. And very quickly, I mean, literally the day I arrived in Hollywood, having left my old life behind and thought I'd give it a couple of years out here and see what happens, I met up with some friends and we agreed to make something. We made a little web series that, was just for fun, but also to get us, into the acting union. And it did better than we expected. And people came on board. We just, found quite well-known actors and said, we're just doing this thing. It's a day's shoot. Are you interested? Yeah, I'll do that. And that sort of snowballed into the short film that I made with Misha, which did well, and a lot of other projects that together we've worked on, and individually Misha and others of his partners have made. And nowadays you can make a movie, or in our case, a short film, or in our case, an audio movie. The technology is there. Your iPhone will make good movies. You don't need expensive kit. What you need is a story and talented people to work with.
And I mean, it's a great series. It's a great series, and I mean, I watched the first episode, and it's a brilliant show to watch. And I mean, for our listeners who want to watch this, I mean, how can people get to see it?
Well, of course, it's a listening experience rather than a watching experience.
Oh, listening, should I say?
Watch it up here, though.
It's been distributed by Wondery, which is a subsidiary of Amazon. So if you like your podcast, or go onto a podcast platform such as Apple or Spotify or any of those and just put in Unsinkable, it'll pop up. The first 2 episodes are free to listen to for anybody, anywhere. If you're gripped by it and want to listen more, it's on Wondery Plus, so it's a subscription service for the next or for 90 days in total, and then after that it'll be available everywhere worldwide. But that's how you do it. You just stick it into iMusic or Apple
Podcasts or Spotify. Yeah, you'll find it.
And then any of those, and it will pop up, and you can just and listen and make sure you turn up the volume and stick your best headphones on, or listen to it in a car with good sound system, and because it's a fully immersive sound, including being in Dolby Atmos, which gives you a whole 3-dimensional sound effect.
And then in addition, every single week, what you'll find is after each episode has been released, at least through Wondery's platform, there'll be an inside the episodes, which was filmed. We have a multicam set up where we've got interviews, not only with John and myself, where we go inside each episode, specific moments. We'll talk about in some cases, the history, some cases of what went on set. And then we'll go into interviews with some of the cast and some of the other collaborators as well. We have moments with the composer, and yeah, you really get a chance to sort of explore each episode in a bit more depth.
And other than Unsinkable, is there any upcoming projects that you're currently working on, or is it all secretive at the moment?
I don't think there's anything secretive. Obviously, we're full speed ahead on this project as it comes out week by week at the moment. Obviously, we would love to see this grow into the visual medium. We'd love to see it as a TV series. I've rewritten again the entire TV series based on a lot of stuff that we learned when doing the audio series, and the truthfulness of performances and the way scenes work. So we have that ready to go, and we'll be talking to the producers on that front. As to other things, well, I think we'll need to take a bit of a breath. Because this has been this has taken up over the last 4 years of our lives.
No, for sure. These things, when you decide to jump into them, you have to jump in head first, feet first, all of it together. It's all encapsulated, and almost half a decade it's taken to sort of put this out into the world. Certainly, that projects take a long time, so you have a few things in the pipeline alongside. Certainly at Datura, I have a production company out here. We have some other IP that have been moving into different stages, but like the focus certainly right now has been all steam Unsinkable. And like John said, next step with this project is to make sure that we can realize that in the visual medium, whether that ends up being the television series or the feature film. I'll let you know.
And we also have 4 more stories set in the Second World War that I have the rights to, and I have started writing. I've written the pilot in the first few episodes of what would become season 2, be it audio or visual. So we do have more to do, a lot more we can do.
Yeah, some of the characters of this show will remain, and continue into the subsequent seasons. And so there's certainly a way for this world to live on, and we've thought about it extensively. And there are even scripts that have emerged for season 2 already.
Interesting. I'll watch for space. So, my final question for you is, because I like to give the final word to you two. So, what would you like to say to our listeners who is listening right now?
I think that, well, with regards at least to Unsinkable, we hope that they are able to dedicate just a small amount of time to give the show a try. And if they do that, we think they'll be in for a ride that will take them on a very immersive and compelling journey with their ears. And we've tried to put this into a standard that it's quite rare. They'll have the opportunity to listen to something that's been produced by some of the finest professionals in the world, some of the finest actors in the world, and will hopefully take them on an epic journey that's not only going to be entertaining, but tells a story that, quite frankly, was such an important moment for the history that shaped the world that we live in today. Some of the decisions that were made then really fundamentally then shaped the outcome that we all, certainly in Western civilization, have benefited from.
Yeah, I would echo that entirely, and just emphasize that it was the sacrifice of these civilian sailors that saved our country in both world wars. The closest we came to losing both world wars was because of the Germans' tactic of trying to starve this country into submission by sinking our cargo ships, and it was their sacrifice, the 36,000 civilian sailors who died just in the Second World War, saved this country. And one of the reasons I wanted to tell this story as someone who comes from that background is just to remind people that this, which of something that I think is fading from memory. And I think this is a great way of reminding people, as well as telling an extraordinary, gripping and satisfying story.
John, Misha, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been great talking to you.
Appreciate you having us.
Thanks, Chris.